Welcome to the HawksZone Rundown, your go-to podcast for all things Seattle Seahawks as we gear up for this 2025 season. My name is Bryce Coots. I'm going to be your host again tonight, guys, and welcome back. We're going to be diving into a training camp sort of preview show here with a spotlight on the hidden gems and roster battles that could shape this Seahawks season and it being its 50th season and that milestone. And today we're going to be thrilled to have Corbin Smith back in the Hawk Zone, discussing everything down to the under-the-radar players like Jake Bobo, Olu Oluwatimi, and even rookie Gray Zabel, who might steal the show in Renton come training camp in a few weeks. You can find Corbin stuff over at the Emerald Spectrum website. He's got amazing content over there, as well as what he does on Locked On Seahawks. He is a Seahawks beat reporter, and Corbin is one of my go-to sources all the time for Seahawk content. So make sure, though, with that all being said, to subscribe to this channel, the HawksZone Rundown. We are on Spotify, Apple Podcast, iHeartRadio, so make sure you guys subscribe over there. Click the notification here on YouTube so you never miss any of our content. And if you want to join our membership program, it gives you exclusive content, perks, different things, as well as check out our HawksZoneRundown.com merchandise store. We just dropped a bunch of new polo shirts over there. There'll be new hats coming out for this season. So make sure you guys go over there, check that out, order yourself some HawksZone Rundown gear. But with all that being said, guys, I'm super thrilled to be talking to Corbin. So check that interview out right after this.
So y'all can sit here and ask me all the questions y'all want to.
Don't you ever talk about
Man, let's go. It's go time, baby.
I'm just about that action, boss.
You ready to go get it. You just like to do it.
That's what it is.
Defense trying to do that. Pass is caught back in. Can't chase it. What a catch! Jackson Smith and Are you kidding me? Baldwin. Oh my goodness, he caught it.
This is the HawksZone Rundown with your hosts, Ryan and Bryce.
Welcome back, everybody. And as promised, I got Corbin Smith in just before training camp, before he gets super busy in Seattle dealing with all the stuff he's going to have to on a daily basis. Corbin, it's great to have you. Thank you for taking the time. What's going on?
Well, I'm enjoying this little bit of the calm before the real storm hits, but we can't say there hasn't been news. So you have to, it's been one of those things I've had to temper my expectations a little bit for how much free time I'm going to have for these couple days before the real bullets start flying at the VMAC next week.
Yeah, so speaking of news, Corbin, obviously today Seattle kind of finalized their draft class. They signed Nick Emenwari late last night and then Elijah Arroyo today. Were you totally surprised by the Nick Emenwari fully guaranteed deal after you saw Jaden Higgins and some of these guys that were that early second round group get these guaranteed deals? Were you overly shocked that John Schneider, as some people have said, caved and gave into it?
This right here is my shocked face. It isn't there. Look, Nick Emenwari was a first-round pick in the Seahawks' eyes, and John Schneider made that very clear like 45 minutes after that pick went through. And the comments that he made when we were talking to him after day 2 of the draft, and he acknowledged, because he was asked the night before, who are some other players? He's basically, who are some other guys you got to pick there? And of course, John Schneider's not going to say, because if some of those guys are still on the board, he's not going to be saying, hey, we really like this guy. But then he said after day 2 that we had Nick Emenwari right with Gray Zabel. So they feel like they got 2 first-round picks. So it isn't surprising to me at all. And I was talking to a couple people that are in the building last week, and they were expecting that this is probably what was going to happen. And I don't even know that it's because Jaden Higgins got that deal. There's a lot of people out there saying, well, Houston forced him into this. I don't think that, you can look at it and say, well, maybe John Schneider, well, now I absolutely know I'm going to do this. But they already had a first-round evaluation, a clear, surefire first-round grade on Nick Emenwari. They were talking about trading up for him on night 1, getting back into the first round to get him. That's how concerned they were he wasn't going to be there, and they wanted him that badly. So I don't think there was really any tussling here as far as this fully guaranteed money goes. John Schneider gave that to Gray Zabel, and they felt that Nick Emenwari was just as good, and he had a first-round grade. So they have no issue with giving their number 35 overall pick that first-round perk that now I think is starting to be a trend here. Now we're going to see these early second-rounders that were guys that were fringe first-round talents. They're going to start getting those fully guaranteed dollars because they don't have the massive contracts that early first-round picks do. You can take fully guaranteeing the money. And if it's a guy that you really like and it's a way to make sure he's going to be there for the start of training camp, then get it done. So I didn't see any surprise as far as that one coming to fruition the way that it did.
Yeah, I know. I kind of expected it as well when, we're talking about, like you said, a fringe first round talent that they were quite happy taking potentially at pick 18 if they couldn't have landed Gray Zabel. The thing for me that's also interesting, like you said, Corbin, is it's fully guaranteed, but we're not talking about, a Kirk Cousins level fully guaranteed deal. We're talking about $80 to $100 million guaranteed. We're talking about anywhere between, 10 to 15 maybe tops if we really wanted to get really extreme with it for these guys. Now we talk about Elijah Arroyo, who's another one of those guys that was in that, if he had been healthy, might have been a first round capable tight end potentially. He got his guaranteed. It almost seems about 80% of it's fully guaranteed. Did you expect right after Nick Emenwari signed that Elijah Arroyo was going to get signed relatively soon in the next couple of hours, basically?
Yeah, after this news with Emenwari came out last night, I did a instant reaction podcast on Locked On Seahawks and made it very clear that I expected that Arroyo was not going to get a fully guaranteed deal, but I thought he was going to get signed very quickly. So when the news came out today, I was like, well, I thought that was exactly how it was going to play out because you started to see the dominoes fall yesterday, Bryce. You saw not just the guaranteed deals, the fully guaranteed deals. You started to see some other second rounders that were signing for a high percentage of fully guaranteed money or of guaranteed money, but they weren't getting the full 100%. And Elijah Arroyo at pick 50, being a tight end, having some injuries the past couple of years up until last year, I think there was a number of factors there where John Schneider was not going to fully guarantee his contract, but they were happy at giving 78%. I did the math. It actually is 78%. I had to get a calculator because I can't do math. But 78%, that a lot of people were throwing a conniption about that. It's like, you're talking like $6.5 million. My NFL money, like, that's pocket change. Like, I don't see what the big deal is, to be honest. And I've never really understood why fans get so into like bean counting. Like, I don't know about messing with other people's money. If the team is willing to pay that, then what's the big deal? I just don't think it is. I don't think it's significant.
I totally agree. At the end of the day, they have cap specialists and guys that are completely dedicated. Their entire job is to making sure that the franchise will be in a good standing. And, Joey Lane seems to be doing quite a good job at that coming in from Matt Thomas. So I'm not too worried either about that situation myself, Corbin. So let's kind of get into it, Corbin. Training camp's here. It's basically starts next week. I know you'll be heading there very shortly to Seattle to get ready for training camp. So my first kind of question in setting the stage for this camp is, what are you expecting year 2 in Mike McDonald's training camp to look like compared to what you saw last year in year 1? Obviously, there's the new whole offensive, scheme coming in with Clint Kubiak and these coaches, as well as Cooper Kupp, Sam Darnold. There's no more Geno Smith, DK Metcalf. Tyler Lockett's no longer there, which has been, the weirdest thing seeing him in a Titans jersey. So what are you expecting to see initially when you get there and start covering this going forward next week?
Well, as far as areas that I'm going to be watching most closely, the first couple of days is just like OTAs and mandatory minicamp. You're going to have helmets and no shoulder pads. It's going to be a glorified off-season workout is basically what it's going to be. So it's going to be very similar in the sense to what we had in June and late May, where you're going to be watching how the quarterbacks look in the offense. You're going to be looking at how the receivers look with running their routes. The little bit defenses are allowed to do, look for who's getting their hands on footballs, things like that. The real evaluation is going to come about a week in when you start the process of building up to full pads. When they have shells on, that's going to be the first thing. Once they have shoulder pads on, you can start to do some football-related stuff on the practice field. And at that point, that's when I'm going to really be honing in on the offensive line. That is number 1, 2, and 3 for me as far as looking at where that group is at. Because until we see them actually hitting dudes and blocking, yeah, hitting a sled is nice, but we don't know what we have there. The Seahawks don't know what they have there. And I'm really fascinated to see what it looks like when John Benton has had a chance to really work with these guys in terms of actual football-related stuff, where they're getting after it in the trenches, they're blocking, and the right guard position, seeing who emerges there. Is Oluwatimi going to hold on to the center position, or does Jalen Sundell have other plans? Looking at the tackle depth, Where does Mike Jarrell fit in? Where does Mason Richmond fit in? The offensive line is storyline 1, 2, and 3 for me, because that's what held this team back from making the playoffs last year, was the offensive line. So I'm going to be watching that group closely. And then on defense, the X's and O's nerd that is me, I am going to be watching the personnel groupings and how Mike Macdonald's using them, because now you're in year 2 with this mad scientist. Most of these guys are coming back from last year. The continuity on that side of the ball is incredibly impressive. And so these guys have played a McDonald's system. They know what to expect now. They're going to be playing full bore, full speed. You can add some new wrinkles. You can add some complexities to it because these guys are ready for that. But I'm really excited in particular to see how Mike Macdonald is going to deploy the safety group. Because, look, I was talking about this on social media last night, and a few people were getting kind of upset. Like, I was not trying to call anyone out. I don't understand how you can watch Nick Emenwari's film and think he's raw. I don't know where that word is coming from. This guy was an unanimous All-American in the SEC. He was a day 1 starter in the SEC on a South Carolina defense that I believe had 5 guys drafted that year. Like, this kid has been a really good football player since he stepped on the field first for South Carolina against the best competition in college football. I cannot wait to see how Mike Macdonald is going to sprinkle him into the lineup with Kobe Bryant and Julian Love, because Kobe Bryant does not deserve to be coming off the field, and neither does Julian Love. But Mike Macdonald loves playing those 3 safety sets, and Emenwari just opens up so much in a playbook that they couldn't do last year. I want to see what that looks like. And even DeAnthony Bell, they're going to run some 4 safety sets this year. And I'm excited to see what that looks like, because they just have such a fun safety group. So personnel groupings, how they deploy these guys, flexibility-wise, position-wise, that is going to be what I'm watching on defense with that next step here for Mike Macdonald's crew.
So outside of the offensive line, where you're going to be kind of focusing with this new offense and Clint Kubiak's scheme coming in, obviously we have Sam Darnold, not Geno Smith. Everyone's got their discussion points on that. How are you going to be looking to the offensive side of things, and what are outside of the offensive line, what areas are you going to be really looking at when you look at maybe the scheme and stuff that Clint Kubiak's doing, as well as the personnel groups, whether it be the receivers or the tight end group? What are going to be some of the things you're really focused on this, training camp to start with, at least?
I want to see from a personnel grouping standpoint, I want to see how the tight ends are going to be used. And I don't know that we're going to get a full viewpoint in these training camp practices, how Clint Kubiak's going to deploy that group. But you've got 3 players that have some different skill sets, different strengths at the top. Noah Fant, A.J. Barner, incoming rookie Elijah Arroyo. Eric Salbert's a guy that Clint Kubiak likes a lot, that is kind of that dirty work kind of tight end. So I want to see how that tight end group's going to be used, because if it's anything like the past, you're going to see a lot of 2 and 3 tight end sets, particularly the 22 and 12 personnel groupings. You're going to see a lot of those with 2 tight ends on the field. I want to see how he's utilizing those different skill sets at the tight end spot. And then when it comes to the quarterback position, I'll be watching all 3, because quarterbacks always are under the microscope. But Sam Darnold in particular, there were a lot of times during OTAs and in minicamp where it felt like the accuracy wasn't quite where it needed to be. And so I'm wondering if that is still kind of a comfort thing, playing in this offense, playing with all brand new receivers. I want to see him be more confident and more comfortable in a timing-based system. I mean, they did a lot of timing concepts in Minnesota, and he did really well last year. But I want to see that in this offense that is not a carbon copy to the one that Kevin O'Connell's running in Minnesota. I want to see how that timing works out with all these new receivers. And look, I'm not going to lie. There's one receiver in particular. I am really excited that Torrey Horton is not starting the starting training camp, on the non-football injury list, because that was somebody I was keeping a close eye on, with him being very limited during offseason workouts. My understanding is he's ready to go full bore now after having this break in between OTAs and minicamp and the start of training camp. I want to see where Torrey Horton fits into this offense, because they're going to need a field stretcher to help make up for Metcalf and Lockett being gone. Marquez Valdez-Scantling can do that, but I think Torrey Horton has a chance to be a far better all-around receiver right out of the gate. than what Marquez Valdez-Scantling is. So that's a player I'm going to be watching really closely too. But you got to look at the receivers, the quarterback, and getting that timing-based offense running in rhythm where it was kind of inconsistent in June watching on the practice field.
Yeah, no, Torrey Horton for me, Corbin is definitely someone I'm super excited. Was not one of the guys I saw on the physically unable to perform list to start. I'm really excited to see what he does because I think it's going to be very interesting to see how the numbers of this team play out when it comes to putting that 24 guys together on offense, how many receivers they keep, because in the past they've kept upwards of 6. With the amount of tight ends that we're talking about, potentially a fullback and Robbie Oots, and we're going to be keeping probably 3 quarterbacks. That's going to be a very interesting positional group there in the receiving core. We know JSN and Cooper Kupp are kind of the locks, but I agree with you. I think there's a good chance Torrey Horton really pushes MVS for that spot, and I think there's a good chance Jake Bobo is going to be a very big part of this offense, more so than maybe people initially think, because earlier I had a conversation with Bobby Peters talking about this offense and some of the things. He said one of the biggest keys with this offense, if you're going to play receivers, your ability to block, and we both know Jake Bobo is quite a good blocking receiver. I think he's going to be someone to really watch in camp this year and probably might get used a lot more efficiently than he has in the past. But let's kind of move over to camp battles to watch, Corbin. What are some of the battles you think that are going to be really interesting to watch? Obviously, we can talk about the 2 big ones, which would be center and right guard that everyone's going to be paying attention to. But what are some of the other ones you're going to be really interested in watching? Not necessarily for the first and second string, but maybe the guys that are fighting for that 3rd and 4th spot.
Well, we'll start on the offensive side of the ball. And obviously, I could talk about right guard and, ad nauseum. It has been discussed for the last 6 months before some of these new guys were brought in. I don't know that center is going to be a competition. We'll see. Oluwatimi played really well if you go back and watch the tape. And that's not taking anything away from Jalen Sundell because he is a really good athlete. He's played with Gray Zabel. There's that built-in continuity from their days at North Dakota State. But Oluwatimi, I think people are sleeping on how well he played in the second half last year after Connor Williams abruptly retired. So going away from the O-line, because again, I these are competitions that we've been talking about on all of our shows for months. But I want to look at the running back position because I think there's just kind of this, for most fans, I think there's kind of this preconceived notion that Ken Walker III, with his athleticism, his explosiveness, this zone-heavy scheme, that this is just a match made in heaven. He's going to be the number 1 guy, and then Zach Charbonnet clearly number 2, and that Kenny McIntosh is clearly number 3 because of how well he played the end of last year. But Damian Martinez is a player, man. Damian Martinez is everything that Mike McDonald wants this offense to be in terms of mindset. He is a punisher. He has elite contact balance. And it's funny, when you watch him on a field, he's kind of a taller, he's not as big as you would think in terms of being 217 pounds. He's got decent sized legs, but he doesn't look like that bulldozer that you typically would think of. But he plays that way. And he did it at Oregon State. He did it at Miami. It hasn't mattered who he's played against. Washington Husky fans know this all too well from him at Oregon State, just absolutely chewing up the Huskies on the ground. I think Damian Martinez is a player that could very easily come in and make not just Kenny McIntosh, but Zach Charbonnet sweat, because I think he's that kind of a player. He is extremely good when it comes to the ball carrier vision aspect too. I feel like he plays faster than what his athletic testing suggests. And he ran a 4.51. It's not like he was slow for a 270-pound back, but he plays quicker because of his instincts and his vision. He is able to decipher those cuts before they open up. Those kind of backs are the ones that have a lot of success in this offense. You look back at the Denver Broncos under Mike Shanahan, some of the running backs they had that ran for 1,000 yards. I mean, Mike Anderson was a converted fullback and ran for 1,000 yards. You don't have to be a 4-3 guy to be successful in this offense. You have to have really good ball carrier vision and instincts and quickness. You got to know how to hit your holes in that little quick split second that it's there. And I think Damian Martinez is a guy that can absolutely do that. And I would even say don't forget about George Halani, too. I mean, George Halani had a great training camp last year, and he does a lot of really good things that Damian Martinez is not known for. His pass protection, he was the best pass protector Seattle had in training camp last year. So that is a really fun group. I think it's going to be competitive. And you mentioned the receiver position. I am curious how many guys they end up keeping because Kubiak has played a lot of 2 receiver sets compared to the last few coordinators who ran 3 and 4 receiver sets quite often. So is there going to be the desire to keep that many? How much does special teams force you to keep? Kick and punt return being a big part of that for guys like Steven Sims Jr. or Ricky White, the 7th round pick, who only had like 7 kick returns his entire career, and he returned one of them for a touchdown last year. Just a really good special teams player. I think that back end at the receiver position is going to be incredibly intriguing because you also have to consider you've got Cody White. Derek Young is still one of the most athletic guys in that receiving core. Maybe the light switch comes on for him in this offense. You mentioned Bobo. I think he is a fantastic fit for this offense. I mean, I could keep rattling off all these names. Both those positions are going to be incredibly competitive at the bottom of the depth chart for those final roster spots.
You know, Damian Martinez was one of my favorite backs in this draft class, Corbin. You know, as a Huskies fan, I know exactly what you're talking about, watching him chew through our defense for 5 yards a pop, and it was like, okay, it's 2nd and 5. They're going to go to Damian Martinez. He's going to get a first down, and here we go again. Let's just hope Oregon State throws the ball because at least that way we have a chance. It's really interesting you talk about the way this scheme for Kubiak's run game, because the one thing I know about the outside zone that you have to be able to do is really push your landmark as a running back to where you are supposed to go and then put your foot in the ground and get north-south. And I know a lot of people have said, you know, well, Ken Walker, this is built for him. The one thing I always get worried about with Ken Walker is sometimes he dances too much behind a line and trying to pick his hole and doesn't necessarily hit it and go. And that's why I feel like I agree with you. A guy like Damian Martinez really could push himself up this depth chart, as well as a George Holani, if they're guys that can just get to their landmark, put their foot in the ground and go. And again, have that ball carrier vision to see that cut back lane that may open as that grouping goes. It'll be a really interesting battle for sure at that spot. And like you said, receiver, that's another one. For me, another one I'm going to be interested in is the cornerback area because of the fact Shaquille Griffin's now here, Josh Job's there. And, you know, a guy like Zion Alexander is going to be another interesting guy, I think, even though he's on the physically unable to perform list right now. I'm interested in that, you know, 3 to 5, you know, cornerback grouping. Because again, I don't know if they keep 6 cornerbacks because we, like you talked about, DeAnthony Bell and Nick Emenwari, those are guys that can play in that nickel spot in case you need to and keep Devin Witherspoon outside in some sub packages. You may not need to carry necessarily 6 guys if you're going to carry 4 safeties. So what do you think of that group and who are some guys you're looking in that cornerback room?
Yeah, it's interesting because before Shaquille Griffin got signed, I was actually looking at Isis Waxter as the undrafted rookie that I was most intrigued by because I think he could play safety in a pinch too. He's 6'2", 210 pounds. He's built like a safety. And he's a guy that had really good tackling numbers, albeit in the FCS level at Villanova. Not a lot of ball production, but some of it just because FCS teams this last year, it's like, well, we don't want to throw at him. And the year before, he had 3 interceptions, and I believe his quarterback rating against was under 10 in his second to last year at Villanova. So Waxter's a guy that just came off the NFI list, so he's going to be ready for the start of camp. He's a guy that I was looking at, and maybe he still has a chance if he's excelling on special teams, but I actually don't know that we're going to have a lot of drama in terms of who makes the roster at the cornerback position because Shaquille Griffin and Josh Jobe are both going to be on this roster. There's no doubt in my mind about that. And I think Shamar Jean Charles is a guy that had a really good offseason program and is an outstanding special teams player. I think you can pencil him in on the roster as well. And obviously Witherspoon and Woolen are going to be on this roster. Do they keep more than 5? I don't know that they need to because safety, I could make an argument for keeping 6 guys at that position when you're considering special teams. As I mentioned, I see 4 guys that are going to play defensive snaps because I think DeAnthony Bell will get some dime package reps. He has played pretty dang well when Cleveland used him the last couple of years. I don't know why Cleveland let him go, but it's the Cleveland Browns. I think he's a guy that could play at a pretty high level for Cleveland every time they plugged him in. So I think DeAnthony Bell is going to get some snaps. Emenwari is going to play a ton. You have your 2 starters in Love and Bryan. And I think behind them, Jarek Reed is now more than a year removed from his ACL tear. I'm hoping to see rookie year version, pre-injury version of him, because he is arguably their best non-kicker, non-punter special teams player when he is fully right. And then he got Ty Okada. Ty Okada has one guy in his corner that is incredibly important. Mike McDonald loves that kid. And I don't know how many times last year, he might have been the second most unprompted guy that was brought up in press conferences behind Kobe Bryant. And we know how much he loved Kobe Bryant last year. Ty Okada is a guy that could still make this football team because he's a really good special teams guy that can play both safety positions in a pinch. So, and AJ Finley's been a good special teams player in the league. I mean, they can't keep all these guys, but that might really hurt the guys that are trying to make the roster at the quarterback position as a sixth, maybe even a fifth spot. If you have that many safeties that can do so many different things, it's a good problem to have. But the competition to me is going to be at the safety position more so than cornerback. Aside from the fact you got to see who's going to be the number 3 corner between Griffin and Jobe. I know a lot of people with the salary that the Seahawks are paying Griffin are saying, well, clearly the Seahawks are saying he's going to be their number 3 guy. As Lee Corso liked to say, not so fast, my friend. Josh Jobe is still a guy that the Seahawks very much love. They loved what he did last year, and Mike McDonald is a big fan of him. So I don't think McDonald's going to care if Griffin makes a couple $1 million more. He's going to play whoever the better guy is. So that's going to be fun to see who the number 3 corner is. But behind those guys, I don't see a lot of drama, to be quite frank with you.
It's really interesting because, you think about the groups we've just kind of gone through. This is the first time I felt in a long time with Seattle, back to kind of what it was like in the early Pete Carroll days when we were going, man, there's guys we don't want to let go, but we may have to let go because there's just so much top-end talent in a safety room or in a cornerback room or whatever there is, that there are guys that could be cut from this roster and go start on other teams, like we saw with Howard and some of these other guys, Ron Parker and stuff that the Seahawks were cutting back then in that era. But the last group I wanted to kind of touch on for camp battles here, Corbin, is the inside linebacker group. And I know it's a thin group. We know the 2 starters are Ernest Jones and Tyrese Knight, but we got Josh Ross, we got Drake Thomas, we have Derek Jackson in behind that. We have Patrick O'Connell. How do you see that group shaping up, and how many do you think they potentially keep?
That's another position, Bryce, that we could see the safeties having a negative impact in terms of how many linebackers are kept, because you have a 6'3", 220-pound tank that you can play at linebacker in Nick Emenwari. And D'Anthony Bell's 215 pounds and can play in the box. When you're in nickel sets, if you have 2 linebackers on the field, you could make an argument that you could plug one of those guys in for Tyrese Knight potentially in certain schemes. So I think that the safety depth is going to have an impact, not just on corners making this roster, but also linebackers. I would think right now, obviously we know who the 2 starters are going to be. And I think Drake Thomas right now, based on everything that I've been told from people in the building, and this is even dating back to last year when he was coming back from the knee injury, there's a lot of Drake Thomas fans in that building. I think that he is the number 3 linebacker right now. But the name to keep an eye on is Derek Jackson coming out of Kentucky. And if he would have been healthy, not only does he get drafted, we might be talking a mid-day 3 pick. The fact that he did not get signed coming out of the draft, that stunned me. It's weird how linebackers are evaluated now, because Seattle signed Jackson Woodard from UNLV, who I loved. I still am very high on him. You don't see guys that are undrafted rookies get cut in May and then get claimed off waivers very often. But that happened with Jackson Woodard. Houston swept him up immediately. So he's a fine football player, but clearly Seattle loved what they saw from Derek Jackson, who was one of the best coverage linebackers in all of college football last year before he went down with a shoulder injury for the last 4 games. Injuries have been his biggest issue, but he's a legitimate low 4'5" guy at almost 240 pounds, and he can cover. He is a downhill thumper that likes to hit in the run game, can play sideline to sideline. That, to me, would be a guy that is the player to keep a really close eye on and just hope he can stay healthy, because if he can, I think there's more upside there than what you have with somebody like a Josh Ross, who obviously Mike McDonald knows from his time at Michigan, but he's not going to be a guy that's going to be playing defensive snaps for you. He might be a great special teams guy, but why not develop somebody that could play defensive snaps for you and also can play special teams? And Jackson's a guy that can absolutely do that.
Yeah, those were the 2 names for me, Corbin, that really I think stand out is Thomas, who's been there. You know that they love his intelligence and how he plays the position. Yes, he's not maybe as physically imposing as some other linebackers, but his contributions on special teams are huge. And then like, I agree with you. Develop Jackson. If you can get a guy that, like you said, was probably potentially like a mid, round pick that you can develop into a potential starter that can push, that's great for your long-term depth. And I agree with you. I think there's a chance that Bell and Emanwari, if we get into dime packages and stuff, are potentially that weak outside linebacker with Ernest Jones on the field, because again, it'll throw fits of defenses. Like you said, when you have an athlete then to the capability of Emanwari that can basically go in and fill a hole as a linebacker, but also drop into coverage out of nowhere and is more athletic than your tight end, it's going to cause some problems. But let's kind of move on here, Corbin, to some of the guys. We talked about some of these guys in the camp battles, but who for you are some players that people may have forgotten, A, are on this roster, and B, are real viable options to be impactful this year for the Seattle Seahawks team?
Well, I got to start off with a guy that just seems like every year is forgotten. And look, I'm going to even say that I was kind of dismissing him. Jake Bobo, before we got to mandatory minicamp and OTAs before that even, I had my pre-OTAs 53-man roster projection, and I decided based on the players that were on the roster, it's like, I think Jake Bobo is going to have a tough time making this team. I took a complete 180 after watching what he might look like in this offense in OTAs and minicamp. And I know he always plays well during the offseason program, but like seeing how he fits with this offense, with the desire to have run blockers at the receiver position and guys that can be chain movers. Jake Bobo is absolutely both of those things. So I went from not having him on 53-man roster projection to now, I'm going to say this right now, Bryce, I think he is on this roster. I don't think there's any drama. I think Jake Bobo is one of the top receivers on this roster. I think Clint Kubiak is going to fall in love with this guy, with some of the stuff that he does really well. And I think this offense, he could be a real problem in the red zone, which I just felt like Ryan Grubb, one of the things that really, there was a lot of things that were frustrating last year with his offense. But just trying to figure out what he was doing in the red zone. We had receivers that were basically on top of each other. There was no spacing. You couple that with not being able to run the football. No wonder Geno Smith was trying to force the ball into coverage, because what else was he supposed to do? They couldn't. They were a mess. Jake Bobo was a guy that I thought absolutely should have been a much bigger player in their red zone packages, and they barely used him there. Clint Kubiak is not going to do that. He is going to find ways to get big number 19 out there. So I don't even want to say he's a forgotten name, but I think there's a lot of people that are dismissing him, and it happens every year. Don't dismiss this guy. In fact, you should be, if you want to get a sleeper fantasy guy for this team, I think Jake Bobo could be that deep sleeper because this offense is such a good fit. And on the offensive line, I'm going to say Satawa Lamea. We didn't get to see him play any right guard in OTAs and minicamp, but when the pads come on, if Christian Haynes or Anthony Bradford or even Bryce Cable do, if none of those three players is really seizing the opportunity and grabbing the bull by the horns, like, hey, by the way, Satawa Lamea was the right guard in there when your run game woke up in the second half last year, and he's played next to Abraham Lucas, and those two guys played well together. I could see Lamea being a guy that goes from being kind of an afterthought backup to Gray Zabel left guard to winning the dang right guard job. I would not be stunned if that ended up happening still, because I could see him being a player that John Benton ends up falling in love with just because he does things the right way. He's athletic. He has positional versatility. He can do the move blocking, and he'll finish dudes. He likes to pancake guys. So I would say those two guys on offense would be the players that jump out to me. And then on the defensive side of the football, I'm going to mention Tyreek Smith here for just a moment. And the reason that I don't want to say that I'm bullish on him, but the reason I could see him making this roster, and I think we should maybe be paying a little more attention, the fact that the Seahawks changed coaches, Bryce, they went from Pete Carroll to Mike McDonald, and Tyreek Smith was in Arizona at this point. The fact that the Seahawks brought him back under a new coaching staff that wasn't involved with drafting him and then re-signed him to a future reserve deal in January, clearly Mike McDonald and company, Adam Durde, those guys, they clearly liked something about him. And he has enough size. He was one of the best run-defending edges in the NFL in the preseason a couple years ago. If he can just unlock a little bit more in his pass rush, They could use a fifth guy on that edge, and he has enough size. And here's the thing, Mike McDonald does not typically play 250-pound guys off edge. Like, he just won't do it. He didn't do it in Baltimore. They've got a few undrafted guys that are that smaller build. I'm already kind of counting those dudes out because I look historically. McDonald doesn't play those kind of players, but Tyreek Smith's around 260. He is in that threshold where you could absolutely play him. So Tyreek Smith to me is a forgotten guy. And then I want to go back to the safety position, and Jarek Reed is the name I'm going to mention again, just because before that ACL tear his rookie year, I thought he was Seattle's best non-kicker, non-punter special teams player when he went down. That guy was making multiple plays every game. He was a great gunner. He was down in the football consistently inside the 5-yard line. He got a few snaps on defense and made some things happen. At that point, I thought we might be looking at a future starter at safety. And then unfortunately the injury happened. This is going to be a really hard group for him to get on the field defensively without injuries in front of him. But if he is the healthy Jarek Reed we saw 2 years ago, he can be a real difference maker as a special teams guy, and it gives you incredible depth with a guy that I still think has the athletic tools and the instincts that he can play defense on Sundays.
Well, Corbin, you took a few guys right out of my wheelhouse with Jake Bobo, Jarek Reed. One guy for me that I know he's not as forgotten now because of what he did in OTAs, but at the start of this offseason, one guy I think that may have been dismissed, I was one of the guys that dismissed him and said, yeah, he doesn't fit this scheme, he's out, is Anthony Bradford. Anthony Bradford, once they went to this Kubiak scheme and the wide zone, everyone became very dismissive of his ability to make this roster. I'm being one of those individuals myself because, I looked at what he did last year in the offense and such. I think it's going to be very interesting to see this battle at right guard between Christian Haynes, Anthony Bradford, Bryce Cabledew, Satawa Lamea. I think it's going to be really interesting, and I think what you see is maybe one of them does bump over and potentially ends up being the backup to Gray Zabel, because I think it's pretty obvious Gray Zabel is probably going to be that left guard. I just think he's a guy overall, like from what you're hearing, and I know you've obviously been there at the OTAs, like everyone's saying his body shape is changed. He looks more in shape to play the position. He's one guy for me on offense. The other guy for me is Cody White. You talked about Jake Bobo. Every time Cody White seemed to step on the offensive field, he makes a play. He's a bigger guy. I think he can block. He's, played in Pittsburgh where they're a team that likes to run the ball and do those things. I think Cody White's going to make this, again, a very interesting battle for those back-end spots, because I agree with you. I don't think it's a question whether or not Jake Bobo is on this roster. I think there's a more than likely chance Jake Bobo is receiver 3 in this offense with Kupp and JSN, and it's basically Horton, MVS, Cody White, Ricky White, Steven Smims Jr., all fighting out for those final few spots. Defensively, guy for me that, I kind of think, he's not necessarily forgotten about, but Jarek Reed to an extent on this D-line. We're talking about, some people have talked about Leonard Williams and what's Byron Murphy going to do this year and all that stuff. Jarek Reed had a phenomenal season last year, and I almost feel to some extent some people have forgotten that he's still an impactful player on that D-line.
I haven't.
I know you haven't, and I haven't either, but I think some fans have. They've gotten more worried about what's going to happen with Byron Murphy than they have with the production of Jarek Reed and what he's been able to do in that defensive front. I think that's going to be really interesting to see. And, you took Jarek Reed away from me. I was looking forward to talking about him, but he's the guy in the back end for me that I'm really excited to see what happens, because I agree with you. Like, I was really excited to see what he was going to become as a defensive player. He was great on special teams, but I was really excited to see what he was going to do when it came to being a safety, being in that defense, making, using his speed and being an impactful player that way. It's going to be a really interesting set of battles and guys that, people need to pay attention to rather than just the big names. Some of these other guys that aren't necessarily big names or as big as names as they used to be, I think are going to have a very impactful role this year for the Seattle team.
Yeah, and I think, there's so many other names you could throw out here. I can't say that an undrafted rookie is a forgotten name because people don't know who they are to begin with, but I'm going to go off on a tangent here, so just bear with me. I want to talk Jared Ivey for a second because I know there's a lot of people out there, a lot of fans that have asked me about Mike Morris. And Mike Morris last year had a pass rush win rate under 3%. That is not impactful in the least bit. And I like Mike Morris, and maybe some light switch comes on for him, but it feels like he has really been one of those guys that he flashes in training camp practices. He can do some things in preseason games, but when you get to the big stage, like last year, he played 3 snaps in the last 10 games total. The Seahawks basically said, like, without saying it, like they were saying, we don't think he's good enough to play for us. And they were saying that last year. And then you have a guy in Jared Ivey who I know his testing numbers were terrible. He had a horrible pro day workout, a 2.0 relative athletic score. But I can tell you from watching him at OTAs and minicamp, like, he's just one of those guys that just moves differently when he's got a football helmet on. And there's just some guys that are like that. And I cannot wait to watch that man start trying to bulldoze people when he is allowed to actually play football. If you watch Ole Miss the last 2 years, I don't know that there was a guy in college football that threw bricks for hands that were as heavy as Jared Ivey. Like when that guy gets his hands in, he would knock 320-pound guards back onto their heels with his initial hit, because he's just got punishing hands. And he's one of those guys that is slippery when it comes to getting into the backfield. We might not see the pass rushing production translate because he isn't a great athlete, but dang, does he find his ways to get back there. And I felt like the coaches were really clinging to him late in OTAs and minicamp. Like they were really excited about a lot of the things this kid was doing. So there's my public service announcement about my favorite undrafted rookie. And to me, Jared Ivey, I had a 4th round grade on him. I still think he's that kind of a player. I think he's a guy that in the right system could start in the National Football League. I cannot wait to see number 51 out there using those battering ram hands that he has. I can't wait till the pads come on, because I think that's when you're going to say, oh, that's who Jared Ivey is. And I think he's going to be really fun to watch.
Yeah, no, he's someone for me too, Corbin, that I'm super excited to watch and see. You know, for me, he's one of the guys I said that I think is going to be having maybe one of the more impactful preseasons where people are going to really take notice, like you said, when the pads are on, when he's able to actually rush and do his things. The other guy for me, if we're going to talk a little undrafted here, is another edge / linebacker, I guess, would be Connor O'Toole, is someone that I'm looking at, the other UDFA that they gave a lot of money to coming in. What have you seen about him that's interesting? Because for me, I think he's going to be another guy that, you know, once he gets the pads on and starts moving, could be a guy that could be very interesting as a rotational piece potentially for this defense.
Yeah, you know, Bryce, he's one of those guys that I mentioned. I know that he was a converted receiver, so he's obviously got really intriguing athletic tools. And maybe the Seahawks are looking at him like they are with Jamie Sheriff right now, who was the darling of the preseason last year, where, yeah, you can be an edge guy, but maybe we can work you as an off-ball linebacker too. And I haven't seen them try to do that yet, but the reason I'm mentioning that could be the case, I said it earlier, you look historically, Mike Macdonald has been very anti-playing small edge guys. Like, he just won't do it. His small guys are like Boye Mafe at like 263. Like, those are the smaller guys that play off edge, because he wants guys that can put their hands in the dirt and be able to mix it up with tackles, and also can be 2-point stance and can fly upfield, can draw back in coverage. So he's looking for bigger guys that can handle that. Now, maybe Connor O'Toole ends up being somebody that is an exception to that norm, and he's so explosive athletically that Mike Macdonald can't help but get him out there on the field. But I think when you look at the track record, which is why I was kind of surprised, they signed a bunch of guys that were like that. Brandon Coleman was another undrafted rookie they signed that is an athletic, undersized, kind of twitchy edge. If they're not looking at those guys as kind of that hybrid linebacker, I'll be surprised, because I don't see the fit with what Mike Macdonald has preferred in the past at all. He'd rather have a 280-pound dude that can play defensive end and go out in a 2-point stance than a 245-pound guy. That has typically been the way he's done things. So I'm not saying Connor O'Toole can't make a splash, but I'm kind of pessimistic on players that are built like that. I haven't seen any. There's no previous precedent that would suggest that Mike Macdonald's okay or confident with playing guys like that on his defense.
Yeah, and that's the reason for me why I'm kind of intrigued by him is exactly kind of the reasons why you said you don't know if he'll make this team is it's kind of interesting that they are taking that guy and bringing him in and seeing what he can do. So I'll be interested to see what he does. And then the one other guy that I'm going to mention that's not an undrafted rookie, but he is a rookie and a guy that I'm going to be very interested once he gets healthy and how he impacts this defensive line is Riley Mills. From everything I've seen, when they got him, I was so excited, Corbin. I was like, this is a steal. I had a higher grade on him than where he went. I can't wait to see what happens when you get him involved in this defensive rotation on this D-line.
I didn't have him in my top 125 players because of when he had his injury. Like, those are things that I consider in my big board. And I think NFL teams clearly view it the same way. Because the Seahawks picking him in the 5th round, that is lower than I would have had him. Like, if Riley Mills is healthy, I probably had him as a late 2nd, early 3rd caliber player. Because before that injury against Indiana in that college football playoff game, like Indiana's O-line, they started to show some issues down the stretch. They were really rock solid the first 8 or 9 weeks, but like he was just torturing them. And the poor quarterback, I'm a huge fan of him, although he went to the 49ers. Now he's the backup for Brock Purdy. But, you know, I felt horrible for the quarterback because it's just like this dang 91 just keeps getting in there and mucking things up. And he was doing it the entire game before he got hurt. And there were a couple other Notre Dame games I watched where I couldn't keep my eyes off him. He was kind of in that Ty Robinson class. I loved Ty Robinson from Nebraska, kind of similar players that have the same type of positional versatility and motor. So we'll see what happens. I was encouraged by the fact I knew he was going to start training camp on the NFI list. I knew he was not going to be ready for the start of camp, but you did get to see him doing like some 50, 60% get off drills on the side in mandatory minicamp, which that was an encouraging sign to me. He was doing that in mid-June. We'll see what happens. The Seahawks are not going to rush him back. He is going to, when he is ready, that's when they will let him play. But I do think because of the situation with Mike Morris that I mentioned, that he hasn't developed the way that people hoped, at least at this point. You don't have Cameron Young anymore. They've got some depth concerns in that interior D-line. So if Riley Mills can get back healthy, there is absolutely a role for him as one of those interchangeable defensive tackles, defensive ends that can play 3-tech, 5-tech, and do a lot of damage in this defense. I can't wait to see him play. We just don't know when that is going to be happening, unfortunately, given how late that injury happened in January.
So, Corbin, let's kind of get on the final topic of tonight's show, and that's kind of the big picture and season impact. I know you're going to be really busy. You're going to be covering the team for the extended period, so I don't know when we'll be able to get you back. So I kind of wanted to get your feelings on what is your expectation for this team going into 2025. Do you really think they can compete for the division? A lot of these national media outlets have them as the 3rd or 4th ranked kind of team in there, below even the Cardinals and some of them. How do you see the Seahawks team in comparison to where they were last year and what the expectations should be for this team?
I think that this is a tale of two teams right now in terms of how you assess them. And that might seem like the low-hanging fruit, but that's the reality here. The defense, 13 of the 14 players that had the most snaps last year are back. Mike McDonald has all of his key players back on that side of the ball. They add DeMarcus Lawrence, who, if you watched him in Dallas before he got hurt last year, he is still a very good football player. And I think he's going to be a great fit for Mike McDonald's defense. Just another junkyard dog mentality type guy that just knows how to play football, knows how to lead on and off the field. They've got all the pieces there. The nucleus is there for this defense to be a top 3 caliber scoring defense. They showed it second half last year, a full season with Ernest Jones, getting DeMarcus Lawrence added there. You're hoping you're going to have a healthy Uchenna Nwosu for the start of the season. The defense to me is a 12-win type defense. Like that is, it is a top level defense. What is going to determine where this football team goes is on offense. And I know a lot of people that are listening are probably going to say it's Sam Darnold. I'm not going to say that it's Sam Darnold. If Sam Darnold has to carry you, they are going to be in trouble. And they don't have Justin Jefferson for him to throw to, and that's not taking a shot at JSN. JSN's a very good player. Justin Jefferson, though, to me is the number one receiver in football. I think he is the most dynamic pass catcher out there, and Sam Darnold benefited a lot from having him last year. If you're asking Darnold to equal the numbers he had last year, that to me is a bad sign. But if they can run the football the way that Clint Kubiak and Mike McDonald have said they want to, the way that their coaching staff moves and their personnel moves show that they want to do, that they want to get that ground game going. If this run game improves to being a top 15, top 16 rushing unit with the pieces they still have in the passing game, that is what is going to get this team to 11, 12, 13 wins, is the offense finding an identity that fits with what Mike McDonald brought from Baltimore. He wants that physical blue-collar football team. They've made the moves to try to do that. Now it's up to everything coming together, the coaches getting these guys where they need to be. I just think the most important thing is going to be the offensive line, the health up there, getting that run game going, having a healthy Abe Lucas out there. What a difference that is. I think he moves the needle for this team more than anybody on the roster in 2025. That's what is going to get this team to that point. If they're relying too much on Sam Darnold, though, and the defense maybe doesn't meet expectations, then this could be a 6, 7, 8-win team. That's the kind of chasm we're looking at. I think the talent is there to be 11, 12-win team, absolutely, and be in contention to win this division. But it's going to boil down to that offensive line and the run game to me. Those are the two things that absolutely have got to be much better for them to have a chance to do that.
I'm in total agreement with you, Corbin. I think this can be an 11, 12-win football team, and I agree. I don't want Sam Darnold to be the reason the Seahawks are necessarily winning a bunch of football games. Like, I want to be a part of that, in that solution in the equation, but I want them to be able to run the football. I want them to be able to control games and let this defense go to work and do a lot of the things it's capable of doing. And I agree. You can't expect Sam Darnold to have that season that he had last year. And I know everybody and their brothers can look at me, well, if you can't expect him to have that, why'd you bring him in kind of mentality? If Sam Darnold, for me, throws for 3,200 to 3,500 yards and 25 touchdowns and 10 interceptions, that to me is a perfectly fine season for this offense and to play quarterback in, if you have the run game to go along with it. That's the caveat with that whole thing. What does the running game numbers look like? I don't expect this team to necessarily blow teams out and be in a lot of high-scoring contests necessarily, because I don't think that's how Mike McDonald wants to play it either. I'm sure he'd love to, but I think he wants an offense that can control the game, and I can't remember his exact quote, but I think it's something along the lines of they want to be something that nobody wants to play against. They want the mentality of a team that no one wants to play against them. And
they want to be a team that finishes. That was his biggest. And I wrote this article when I was still at Sports Illustrated. I literally published it a couple hours after Ryan Grubb got fired, because here's what reporters do, ladies and gentlemen. We take notes leading up to things. Like, I had a lot of people say, like, how could you write this hit piece like an hour after? It's like, because I already had all this stuff together. Like, I expected that Ryan Grubb was going to get fired. I would have been surprised if he didn't, based on the things I heard. The Vikings and Packers games, when they had opportunities to use their run game to either claw back in or to finish somebody off, Sam Darnold and the Vikings, they had the chance there, and they just kept dropping back and throwing and putting Geno Smith in really bad spots. You know who was really upset about that? Mike McDonald. He wants to be a team that can go out and punctuate those games and finish them with authority, with a physical, grinded-out offense. And so they're not looking for Sam Darnold to be out there throwing for 5,000 yards. They don't need him to. Now, if Sam Darnold goes out and throws for 5,000 yards and like 45 touchdowns, Seattle wins 15 games, then okay, cool. But I don't see those two things going together. If Sam Darnold's throwing that much, that to me would spell that there's some bad things going on that are not playing the way the Seahawks wanted them to this season.
So I have to ask you this final question, just because we did get a little bit on Sam Darnold. How much do you think Jalen Milroe plays this year for Seattle?
I've already predicted this on my podcast. I'm not going to predict how many snaps that he plays, because I think that that's arbitrary when you're looking at game to game. But I think he scores at least 3 rushing touchdowns this year. I think that is where Seattle is going to utilize him a lot, is when they are in the red zone. And that would fit with what Taysom Hill did. And again, Mike McDonald said it. These are not the same players. Taysom Hill is more of that bruising guy that can play tight end, and you can do a lot of other things with him. They're not going to be playing Jalen Milroe at tight end, but Jalen Milroe is a better athlete. Like, he's a legitimate 4.39 guy that ran for 20 touchdowns at Alabama last year. I think you get in the red zone, and teams can't just expect he's going to run the ball either, because he isn't actually a quarterback that had some good success as a red zone passer. That is where I think Seattle is going to utilize him the most. And I know that some are going to say, well, those are high leverage situations. Yeah, you put in amazing athletes in a high leverage situation, and you put the defense in conflict in an area where they have an advantage, where things are so congested. You take away a lot of that advantage when you have a guy like that forces a lot of your players to be in conflicted situations because of his athleticism and his running ability.
It's really funny you say it that way, Corbin, because for me, when I picture Jalen Milroe, I picture the exact same way of using him. But what I think they should use him as is how the Carolina Panthers used to run inside the red zone with Cam Newton. When you had D'Angelo Williams and Jonathan Stewart on either side, and you had your tight end, whether it'll be Arroyo or Noah Fant, and you went into that heavy shotgun, two back, one quarterback situation, and you ran QB power. And if you put him back there with Damian Martinez and Robbie Oots, and you say, okay, we're going to run QB power right here, I don't see a lot of teams that are going to be able to stop that. And I think that's one of the factors that Seattle hasn't had in the past. And I think, again, like you said, then all of a sudden you can have a couple little play action plays off of that teams, when they want to overcommit to Jalen in the run game, then you can hit them on the outside with maybe it's a Jake Bobo or Cooper Kupp. But with that being said, Corbin, I really appreciate you taking the time. I know you're getting ramped up for everything right now, so thank you so much for your time. But let my listeners know where they can find you, all your kind of content that's coming out. I know you guys have been doing great work over at the Emerald City Spectrum there. I'm a subscriber to it. I love your guys' content over there, but let everyone know where they can find your stuff.
Yeah, emeraldcityspectrum.com. We're getting ready to add, I believe, our 13th and 14th regional teams. That we've got Gonzaga basketball coming in. I'm really excited about that. We've got the Bulldogs. They're going to be covered. And we've also got the Pro Women's Hockey League team that is yet to be named. That's supposed to be coming soon, the name for the team. But we're going to be covering them as well. And we've got some daily raffles we're doing right now to get 50% off on our annual subscription. So make sure you're checking those out on my social media at Corbin Smith NFL.
Well, Corbin, thank you so much for your time, man. And, enjoy training camp. I'll be there August 1st, so maybe I'll be able to catch you while you're down there.
Just yell, "Hey, Baldy, how's your Chrome Dome?" And I'll know who you're yelling at. So
sounds good, Corbin. Thanks. Well, guys, that was Corbin Smith. Again, so gracious to give us some of his time to come on, talk Seahawks, the things he's looking for going into training camp, some of the battles he's really excited to dive into and watch, and not necessarily for starting reps, but more for the situational guys that are going to be your third, fourth, fifth, sixth, guys are going to finish out this roster and complete it. It's going to be really interesting. And some of the forgotten, players on this roster, I think some people maybe have dismissed or don't think will have the impact necessarily as some of the top end big names that we have on this roster. So again, guys, make sure you go over to Emerald City Spectrum. You can subscribe to it for what it costs you to buy a Starbucks coffee drink. It is great content. They do an amazing job over there covering all the different sports teams in the Pacific Northwest, and Corbin does an amazing job with the Hawks in general. Go check out Locked On Seahawks as well. It's one of my daily listens all the time when I'm not obviously listening to our show. But yeah, guys, go over, give that a listen as well, and subscribe over there. The links for all that stuff, guys, will be below in the description of this show. And don't forget, guys, you know what? We're on Spotify. We're on Apple Podcast, iHeartRadio, YouTube here. Subscribe to the channel, please. It really helps us bring you guys guests like Corbin and other ones that we'll have on throughout the season, as well as allows us to give you guys more exclusive content that we're going to try and give you throughout this season as well. Join the membership program, guys. You're going to want to, because I'm telling you, as this season gets closer, we're going to have more members-only content that you're going to want to pay attention to and you're going to want to be involved in. It'll also give you some discounts on stuff at the merchandise store. We'll give discounts away with that, guys, when you sign up for the membership program. And again, go check out HawksZoneRundown.com. We just launched our polo shirts. We've got T-shirts, hoodies, beanies, or toques if you're up here from Canada, and we still call them toques up here, as well as hats and different style of hats. And we're going to be dropping some new logos coming up. So Make sure, guys, you go over there and check that out. Again, Field Goals, another place to find us over there with Mookie Alexander and the crew at Field Goals. Our links for those will be down below as well. But, guys, we're going to have our NFC West preview shows starting up this week. We're going to be looking at the Rams first. That's going to be one of the first teams that we're going to look at. It will be a members-only release to start with. So make sure you guys, if you want to get into that early and see what it's all about, join the membership program, and you can do that on the YouTube page. But with all that being said, guys, hope you enjoyed tonight's show. We got more for you coming up as training camp now kicks off. So let's go. Go Hawks.